Excellent. So we saw it, right? And that intro is all about this series, the fall series that we're in, and it's called The Promise Keeper. And it's built on this one thing: God makes incredible promises to us, maybe over 7,000 personal promises from God into our lives. And it tells us this is how He wants to relate to you and me. And so we're returning to our fall series this morning. And so here's what we're doing. We're just gathering up these collections of promises that God makes into our lives that are so significant, and we're just exploring them, kind of unpacking them and letting them speak into us. And we're going to do that again today. And so I want to start this way. Really engage with this, all right? So do you have a definite weakness? So I'm asking you to be conscious about that, and would you have the honesty to say to yourself, yes, I do, or no, I don't really have any weaknesses. And if that answer was yes, would you just silently say it to yourself? Do you have a definite weakness? So for you, was it maybe something others could easily recognize? Maybe it's like a disability, and that's what you said to yourself. Maybe for you, it's a medical diagnosis, and you're having to treat it really aggressively, and the treatment makes you weak. Maybe for you, it's an internal issue, a mind-heart issue that makes you fearful or distrustful or apprehensive, and you feel weak from it. Or maybe for you, you've let something into your life that has turned into an addiction, and it's made you weak. Or for you, I don't know if you had this level of honesty. Maybe for you, you named something in your character. Maybe a tendency in you that constantly, maybe over and over, gets you in trouble, or it makes you not live up to all that you want to be, and honestly, it weakens you. So here's the purpose of the exercise, and that is this: that if you follow Christ, if you allow the gospel to have its work, let it work itself out in you, listen to this, your weakness could turn out to be the best thing about you. Now, don't let that be a platitude, all right? Because it's got real meaning, and it's going to have meat to it when we work our way through that. So there are a set of promises that God makes throughout Scripture that has to do with our weakness, and it is what He replaces it with. And so this is what we're doing. Remember, we're sort of just giving you a sample of a collection of promises, and then we dig into how God makes that work. And so here it is. These are promises that God makes to give you strength. So look at the first one, and it's probably the expected one, right? Philippians 4:13. It's written on every other mug up in your, cupboard, and that is, for I can do all things through Him who strengthens me. Except 99% of us miss what that actually means because the context was written. So Paul's writing to the Philippians, and so Paul's writing about AD 62, and where is he? He's in Rome. And where in Rome is he? He's in prison. The most famous prison in Rome is the Mamertine prison. You can visit it today, and you'll be shocked by what you see, because the Mamertine prison had more in common with a sewer pit than it does a prison. You were dropped in from an upper grate. You're just dropped into this hole in the ground, and you live there in all of the filth and the drop food into you. It was a terrible kind of existence. And here's Paul in that situation. Almost everyone has abandoned him. Everyone who has ever been for him has now abandoned him. And he's waiting. He's waiting on death row. He's waiting to be told when he's going to be executed or just executed. And so he's in that context. And now when you read that, I can do all things through Him who strengthens me, suddenly you get that it means this: I can survive. I can survive any hardship through the one who gives me strength. But there's a whole other set of strength promises that God gives us, and let's just work through them. Why are we doing it this way? It's so that you in your journal or in the notes that you take, you can reference these things to go to when you feel weak. And look how the promises roll out from Psalm 28. The psalmist writes, "The Lord is my strength and my shield. My heart trusts in him, and I am helped." Look at Jeremiah, the weeping prophet. Jeremiah writes, "O Lord, my strength, my stronghold, and my refuge in the day of distress." That's who he is. That's who he promises to be in your life. Today, for you, actually might not be Sunday. For you, it might be the day of distress. Look what God promises you. Look at Isaiah 41. There's so many promises of strength in Isaiah. But in Isaiah 41, it's verse 10. God, this is quoting God. God says, "Look, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not anxiously look about you, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Surely I will help you. Surely I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." And so take the encouragement that these supernatural verses, these supernatural words of God, take the encouragement that they offer, and as encouraging as they may sound, it turns out that it may be a bit scary to go through the process that God uses in order to make you strong. Because once you see the process, you're going to realize it means this. The process that God will take you through in order to give you strength will probably mean putting your weakness on display. And so how does God turn weakness to strength? There's a specific passage in the Bible that shows us the process. And again, it comes out of the Apostle Paul's life. And so here is the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians writing this sort of rich church. They really love their luxury. They love their money, and they're kind of snobbish. And you got to be sort of in the right group to go to this church. And so here's Paul sort of writing. And by the way, they loved bragging. It was an art form for the Corinthians. So Paul writes earlier in the passage about something unbelievable that happened in his life, actually being translated into heaven and seeing things that are inexpressible, and it changed who he was. And so he tells them about that. And then he turns in verse 7, 2 Corinthians 12, he says, "Because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations," that experience that he talked about, "for this reason, to keep me from exalting myself, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh to keep me, a messenger of Satan to torment me, to keep me from exalting myself." Verse 8, "Concerning this, I implored the Lord 3 times that it might leave me. But God said," verse 9, "and he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I would rather boast about my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore, I am well content." What is he content with? "I am well content with weaknesses and insults and distresses and persecutions and difficulties for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong." And so this is the Word of God. It's supernatural. It speaks supernaturally, and there is a promise here, and the promise that flows out of it, I want you to embrace this promise. Look at the promise that God makes, and that is that the promise is that he makes you strong through your weakness. It's a promise that no suffering, no difficulty, no weakness, no distress can defeat you. That's the promise. And so look at God's method. God's method for power and strength is weakness. And don't let that turn in your mind to be a religious platitude, that doesn't mean anything, sounds kind of cool, but it means something. It's not a little word game. God's method is weakness, because weakness is an incredibly useful tool in his hand. And so I want you to see in this passage, I want you to see his method. I want you to see how God uses weakness to form you into something extraordinary. If God's going to do it, and if he's going to use the process of the gospel to do it, then here's what he's going to do. He's going to make weakness work in you. And I want to show that to you. Look at what weakness did in Paul's life and what it will do in your life. It's going to do these things, number one. Look at the first thing that weakness is going to do this. It's going to take away something. God's method in using weakness is to take away something. And that's what's going on in verse 7 when he there talks about this thorn in the flesh. And so in taking away something, I want you to listen for three things. Listen for these three things: the thorn, the message, and the thing it takes away. You're listening for the thorn, the message, and the thing it takes away. First of all, the thorn. A thorn in the flesh, he says, was given to me. And so that word, it's the only time that it's used in the New Testament, and that word just sort of generically means something with a sharp point. And so that can mean a little thorn. You know, I grew up in West Texas out on the farm, and a little thorn, we called them stickers. Do you know that, a sticker? Okay, well, it could be a sticker. It could be the sharp point of a fish hook, or it could be a stake driven through a body. It just means something sharp. And so the way to read this word, the way the word is used here in this passage, doesn't really seem to refer to a little thorn, a little sticker. It's not a little thorn in my finger, and now I have a splinter that is irritating me. It's not that at all. It's something debilitating. You read it in the passage, something sharp and painful driven into his flesh. It's creating weakness. And so what was the thorn? Well, here's what the thorn was. Nobody actually knows, and that's important. When I was in graduate school, I was at Southwestern Seminary, and at that time, Southwestern Seminary used to brag that it was the largest Protestant theological library in the world. So I went to the largest theological library in the world, and I decided I'm going to find out what this thorn in the flesh is. So I went to all of those volumes, and here's what I discovered. I researched it, and I found what it was. It was malaria, or epilepsy, or a seeping eye disease, or 20 other possibilities. And zero sure answers. And so we don't know, and that is wise. Because the moment that Paul said that his thorn was, malaria, then you would say, that's not me. But since it's a thorn, since it says a thorn, every one of us can say, Paul had a thorn and I have a thorn too. And now each one of our lives are in the passage. And so there's the thorn. I said to listen for the thorn, and then what? The message. Did you notice in verse 7 that it calls this thing a messenger of Satan to torment me? Now, the phrase to torment me, torment is an okay translation of that word, but this is closer to take the courage out of me, to deflate me, to discourage me thoroughly. That is the best understanding of that word. And so this thorn is a message. Its intent is to drain the strength out of me. And so it's a message, a messenger from Satan. This means something important. When a thorn happens to you, this passage is telling you something really important. When a thorn happens to you, it means that the devil attaches a message to it. He attaches a little message to it. Oh, look at this thorn. I'm going to attach this message for him. When something really tough happens to you, Satan says, I'm going to attach this little message, and it's going to say just exactly the right thing for a purpose, to drain all of the encouragement out of their life. And so he's going to attach a little message, and with the thorn, the little message is going to say, see, you deserve this, because you know you don't deserve anything good. Or you open the message, and the message is going to say, you don't deserve this. And so God must hate you, or he doesn't care a thing about you, or he's powerless and can't do anything. That's why this thorn is sticking out of your flesh. Or the message is going to say, this thing's never going to end. Or it's going to say, why don't you just give up? And you know what to do. And so it turns out that the thing that discourages you most is not the thorn, it's the message. And so God attaches a message too. And it's really what the core of this message is all about. And so it's coming, but he attaches a message too. It's verses 9 and 10. And it's essentially this: I know this is bad. I know this is bad. My grace is going to be more than enough for you. But we're not quite there yet. But there's your choice. There is the difference between utter discouragement and total overcoming strength. It's found in the message. You've got to hold on to one and delete the other. Total discouragement or absolute strength depends on which message you open, read, and believe. It's not the thorn, it's the message that is most discouraging. And so Paul says, when a thorn is there, read the message from God. My grace is going to be enough. And so I said, listen. In this thing that he takes away, I said, listen for the thorn, the message, and then what? The thing that he takes away. Listen to the thing it takes away, this weakness. This is weakness working in us. What is it that it takes away? Did you notice how clumsy sort of the phrase was in verse 7? Clumsy for a reason, to make you notice. So it says there in verse 7, to keep me from exalting myself, a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan, to keep me from exalting myself. He's really repetitive. He's really repetitive, so you'll see it. To keep me from exalting myself. And so here's what weakness is taking away from Paul. You're not going to guess it. It's his own conceit. What? Paul was just writing about being taken up into heaven and seeing things and hearing things too wonderful for us to even understand. Resetting, spiritually resetting. Paul had worked supernatural miracles by his own hand. Paul had presumably been raised from the dead after being stoned by a crazed mob in Lystra and Derbe area. I mean, they left him for dead, and they walked away, and in a little while he got up and dusted off his clothes and went back in. And so he had a tendency. And that's the deadly disease of your heart and mine too. It's not just special people who've got this issue. It's the human heart. It's the deadly disease that's in your heart too. It'll empty you. It'll blind you. It'll harden you. Because in his life and in your life and in mine too, our hearts will take any success, any good thing, and we will convince ourselves that we're self-made, that we're self-contained, that we're self-sustained, that we're self-sufficient. Any heart does it with any good thing, any success that happens in us. And it's a deadly disease. I started saying it will empty you, and it will blind you, and it will harden you, and it'll take away your desire for God, and it'll drain you of faith and dependence on Him. And so your belief that you are strong on your own will make you weak in all the wrong ways. But a thorn that makes you weak will make you weak in the very best ways. It will take away the heart conceit that every one of us has, and it makes us ready for an incredible exchange. And so weakness works in us this way. First of all, it takes away something, but then secondly, weakness exchanges something. That's what's working in verses 8 and 9. Concerning this, I implored the Lord 3 times that it might leave me, and He has said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. And so here too, listen for these things: the prayer, the message, and the thing exchanged. Listen for those 3: the prayer, the message, and the thing exchanged. And so what is the prayer? Look at the prayer concerning this. I implored the Lord. That's a very strong word. That is not a lay me down to sleep prayer. That is a God, I'm calling on you. I'm crying out to you. Would you do this? And so the 3 times means repetitively over and over that it might leave me. It. What is it? Obviously it. It is the thorn and the weakness. God, would you make it go away? And here's the deal. Paul is giving us a pattern. You should too. That thorn in you, you should pour your heart out before God and ask Him to remove it. And you should do it over and over and over, just like Paul. In fact, I've said this before, and so it's time, to say it again. Hey, if I land in the hospital and there is something serious going on, here's the deal. Don't you come around my hospital room praying, God, please help David accept how sick he is and that it's not going to get any better. You're not welcome to my hospital room. You're not invited. You're only invited if you come in praying, God, please knock the snot out of this sickness. And I totally believe in your ability to do it. And then turn to me and say, rise now, take up your bed and go home. That's... Because there are times, listen, there are times in God's wisdom, there are times that He is really glorified by prayer and faith and healing, and we should do that. But Paul got a definite answer to that prayer. And so the prayer, now the message, what was the message? But the message from God then was this. Look, listen closely to this, Paul. It's going to be my grace rather than the removal. It's going to be my grace in your life. My grace is going to be enough for you because I need the weakness in you, Paul, in order to do an exchange in you that will be supernatural, that will be extraordinary. And so here's the deal, Paul. My grace is enough for you because I'm going to make you powerful through your weakness. And so you start fixing your faith on the fact that God is doing something greater, that He's exchanging my weakness for His power, that He's making you a powerful soul. And so there's the prayer, there's the message. What's the thing exchanged? You're exchanging your weakness for spiritual power. Weakness is the only way that strength ever comes into any soul. I'm telling you, I'm convinced of it now after years of trying to walk with the Lord and years of being in the Word of God. It's the only way strength ever comes into a soul. I'm not sure how to illustrate it. This is not a perfect illustration. I've known a few like this, and so maybe this would illustrate it. Have you ever known someone, gotten to know them well, who has like never struggled? I mean, they've got everything we think you need. Maybe they're like good looking and got enough money to kind of do whatever they want to do. If they get bored, I think I'll go skiing, or I'm a little bored, I'm going to go spend a month in the Caribbean or something. But then you really get to know them, and it turns out that their inner life is just thin. It's shallow. There's no depth in them. There's no weight about them. Their soul turns out to have the weight and consistency of cotton candy. And spiritually, they're just insignificant. It's because weakness has never worked in their life. And so the thing exchanged, what is the thing exchanged? It's weakness for spiritual power. We're not even to strength yet. It's weakness for spiritual power. So that the power of Christ, this exchange it's taking away my strength, giving me weakness in order that spiritual power begins to rise up in me. Here's the truth. There is no way greatness can be released into your life until you know your weakness, until you feel your weakness, until you own your weakness. It's the only place that you'll ever develop the courage to face what you've got to face, the only way to find the grace to walk what you've got to walk through. It's the only way to become a person of beauty, of soul, beauty, of significant character, of real greatness. And by the way, greatness has nothing to do with fame. And so something is exchanged. That's what weakness does. There's a third thing. And so weakness working in your life, if the gospel is working weakness in your life, then it takes something away. And it exchanges something, but then ultimately it will produce something. And that's what's happening in verse 10. He says there, therefore I am well content with what? Weaknesses, insults, distresses, persecutions, difficulties for Christ's sake. Last phrase, for when I am weak, then I am strong. Yes. It produces something in us and a byproduct. So listen for this. In the production of something, these two things, listen to these two. It produces something and then a byproduct. So here's the something, verse 10. It's the principle. All of these verses have led up to that last phrase in verse 10. This is the product of what all of the process does, and that is for when I am weak, then I am strong. And this word strong here is awesome because the word strong, dunatos, it's strong is okay. Strong is an okay translation of the word. But 13 times in the New Testament, this word means possible or able. That's better, actually. Because able exceeds strong. It produces ableness in you. That's what weakness, bringing the power of Christ in you, it ultimately produces something, and that something is ableness. And that's all you need. Therefore, look at what can come out of your life with no discouraging effect. Did you see verse 10? Look at all the discouragements. So I'm content with weaknesses, insults, distresses, persecutions, difficulties. That's like every category of what can discourage you. And then a byproduct, what it produces, and then a byproduct. Here's the byproduct. Did you notice in the first phrase of verse 10? Therefore, I am content with. I am content with. How can you be content with any of those things? Only one reason. It's because I know what they produce. I'm taking you here over and over in our preaching and teaching together. I keep taking you here because this, what I'm about to say, is what you need when you face it, when you face the thorn, when you face the storm, when you face the fierce battle. This is what you need to face it. It's because when you face it, it is, and you're wondering why, this is how you face it. It is because you know what it will produce in you. And so I take you over and over to 2 Corinthians 4. I'm going to read, you've got the larger passage there, but I'm just going to read some excerpts out of that. And so he says, but we have this treasure in jars of clay and earthen vessels to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. And so that's important. This treasure, this gospel, the life of Christ, we have that in this earthen jar. That's my body, that's my being, that's everything who I am. And so we're hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed. We're perplexed, but not in despair. We're persecuted, but not abandoned. We're struck down, but not destroyed. Hey, none of that's good stuff. I'm hard-pressed, I'm perplexed, I'm persecuted, I'm struck down. But do you notice that none of those have their intended effect on Paul's life? We always carry around, this is an insight, we always carry around in our bodies the death of Jesus so that what? Here it is. So that the life of Jesus will be revealed in us. What do they produce? What is it that they ultimately do? They ultimately cause the life of Jesus to rise up in us. And he says it another way, verse 16. And so therefore we don't lose heart. And so we're wasting away. Inwardly we're being renewed day by day. In fact, he says, here's how I look at my life. Paul, who suffered in a greater way than you and I will ever suffer. Paul says, for our light and momentary troubles are achieving something. They're achieving an eternal glory that outweighs any discouragement. Verse 18, so we fix our eyes on what is unseen. What is that telling us? It's telling us ultimately the most important thing. Every weakness, insult, distress, persecution, difficulty are producing glory in us. What is that? How's that meaningful? Glory is this. It is the shining likeness of God. What if that was getting produced in you? The shining likeness of God produced in you. Glory is the beauty of soul. What if that was being produced in you? Glory is the inner experience of fully knowing how loved you are by God. What if that was being produced in you? Here's the last word, and we're going to pray. But you've got to fix your eyes on it. Verse 18. You got to fix your eyes on that fact. How do you get this working in you? You got to fix your eyes on it. You have to focus on it and think about it until it grinds your discouragement into little pieces. Glory is being produced in me through this. We got to draw the line, and I want us to do that. I'm going to ask us to bow together if we could, but I'm going to engage you for a moment. So heads bowed, but would you stay engaged with me for one moment? There are hearts and souls in this room who've never embraced Christ and never embraced the gospel, the process, the power for your life to change. I've never embraced that. And I want to say to you that the first step in all that I've just talked about is that, embracing, without turning away from a life with no reference to God, sort of living on your own and turning to Him and saying, I want what Christ did on the cross to count for me. And I just feel burdened to offer that to you if you've never received Christ. And so you can do that right now, and here's how. I don't know what anyone has maybe told you in the past or whatever, but it's not trite. This is the most profound thing you could do. To just surrender your spirit in prayer right now and just say to Him, you can say it silently. God hears every word. You can just say silently to Him, God, I don't understand all of this, but boy, do I ever feel your presence here. And I just want to confess to you that I know I need you. And now, God, maybe for the first time, I want you in my life. And so I lay down all of my resistance. I lay down all of my warring against you in my life. And I turn to you. And I embrace what Christ has done on the cross. I put my faith in it for me. And I ask you, God, to come into my life. And I ask you to forgive me of all of my sin. And I ask you to become the leader of my life. And I ask you to work weakness in me to make me strong. For Christ's followers, you've heard the Holy Spirit. You've heard Him speak through His Word. You know in your life. This again is about surrender. This again is about putting your faith in the power and sufficiency of God and His grace. And this is a moment for you to say, God, I'm sorry for stiff-arming you. I am sorry, God, for going my own way. I am sorry for my own conceit that says I'm enough. I'm self-sufficient. I'm self-made. I'm self-contained. I just surrender all of that, God, and I want you to work weakness in me to make me strong. And I pray that now in Jesus' name.